Back in 1987, game developers Square released the appropriately named game Final Fantasy for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Square was facing bankruptcy at the time, so it actually was going to be their final game if it didn't see any success. The original Final Fantasy has seen many remakes, as I'll go over later on in the video. The footage you're seeing is from the PlayStation 1 port Final Fantasy Origins, released in Japan in 2002 and Europe and North America later in 2003. It's pretty cool when you're creating your party because of the tons of combinations you can play through the game with. I went with a warrior, a monk, a red and a white mage. There's also the thief and the black mage you can choose from. Because of how versatile the system is, it's considered to be a major positive point for the game. Now that the game's got going, you're going to be travelling the world via a world map, exploring towns and dungeons and fighting the bosses at the very end of them. Sometimes these bosses can be ridiculously hard. You're going to be needing to grind a lot of experience points to get your characters strong enough to be able to defeat them. Early on in the game, it's not always going to be experience points you're going to be grinding for. A lot of the time it's going to be gil. You're going to need an awful lot of it, especially if you've got a warrior in your party that needs very expensive weapons provided for him. For me, one of the things I found the most irritating with Final Fantasy was having to save up enough cash for your magic spells. There's enough grinding to be done in this game as it is, and I just think the system was slightly overused and unenjoyable considering its necessity, especially if you've got mages in your party. Now the game's controls are absolutely fantastic in and out of menus, but I will say that the game's pacing is very poor. Occasionally I can have played the game for a good couple of hours and feel like I've hardly progressed at all. I guess the story is very simple compared to what people have come to expect from a Final Fantasy game. However, I know during my first playthrough, however many years ago, I was engaged enough to soldier on. There's the odd plot twist here and there, but simply put, the four warriors of light must fulfill the prophecy and save the world. I would imagine you never seen that one coming. Yes, there is a princess to save, however that bit gets out of the way pretty early on in the game. From then on there's some slightly less generic RPG plots, but don't ever expect anything completely mind-blowing. I did find it engaging enough on my first playthrough though to see the story through to the end. Now I have to admit, I'm a huge fan of Final Fantasy's music composer, Nobuo Uematsu. Now whilst I'm well aware a lot of these tracks aren't going to be making it onto his greatest hits album or anything, it has to be noted he's not done a lot of looking back since the original Final Fantasy. For example, we still hear the Crystal theme at the very start of the game, and we still hear that catchy theme tune once you've beaten a battle. Now at times, old school RPGs like this can be very unforgiving. I'm aware that a lot of gamers today who are used to faster paced games and those that never experienced what it was like to play on consoles such as the NES may not see 10 minutes into the game. However, it should be noted that Final Fantasy played a huge part in the history of video games, and it is worth trying out a stage setter of the RPG genre. Square's certainly not done a lot of holding back with giving people alternative ways to play the game. It's been re-released on the MSX, the WonderSwan Color, this version which is for the PlayStation 1, Game Boy Advance, the PSP, smartphones, the Wii Virtual Console, the PlayStation Network and the Nintendo 3DS. They clearly want people to give Final Fantasy a go, however I do already own it for the PlayStation 1 and the Game Boy Advance, so for people like me I really can't see as there's another reason to be buying it again. For those of you who don't own a copy in one form or another, you should make every attempt to do so, especially if you've never played the game before and fancy a blast from the past with a video game classic. Thanks a lot for watching. Feel free to check out my review of Sega's Road Rash next week. Until then, see ya.